Toast. Begin by try to begin.
The wine's good, isn't it?
Yes, when it stays in the cup. We say l'chaim first. I want to say l'chaim to everybody and wish everybody a l'chaim means to life. So to life, not only in a physical sense, but also l'chaim in a spiritual sense, to a spiritual life. We should all find our spiritual nourishment. And we say l'chaim, l'chaim v'livracha. We say l'chaim twice. It's a custom amongst Hasidim. We say it twice because we can live our life just by passing through this world, just going, doing it, living whatever comes our way, tackling the day-to-day life without actually living our life. So we say l'chaim. It shouldn't just be lived by sort of reacting to whatever happens around us, but l'chaim, we should take life by the horn, so to speak, and live our lives to the fullest. And with my background, I'll tell you, the way to do it is by getting a little bit more in tune with our neshama, our soul. I'd like to share with you a story. First, say l'chaim. The founder of the Chabad movement, Chabad, originated about 250 years ago in Russia, as Miles mentioned. And there's a story about the Alter Rebbe, he was called, and his teacher. They were walking once with a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, three of them walking down the street. And the Maggid, the name of his teacher, was a teacher of the Hasidic teachings, very holy, profound Torah thoughts. And they were walking, they noticed a piece of paper on the ground. This piece of paper, they looked a little closer, had Hebrew words on it. They picked it up and they saw that it had actually the Hasidic teachings written on this piece of paper. And the other disciple of the Maggid that was walking with them said, "Look at this, Hasidic teachings in the dirt, in the mud. This is inappropriate. Look what's going on. People are not taking care of it. People are not treating it with the respect that's due to it." And the Alter Rebbe listened to what happened. The Alter Rebbe was the Chabad founder, and he responded with a parable. He said, there was once a king. All good parables begin with a king. And this king had a son who was very, very sick, very, very ill, life-threatening. No cure was found. That they called all the doctors in the city, in the country, and all over the world. They're looking for the best doctors around. They couldn't find any cure. So one day they got a knock at the door, and there's an interesting looking fellow over there. Doesn't look like much of a doctor, but he claims that he has credentials and he has a medical background. They were so desperate they'll take anybody. He comes inside, takes the vitals of this young prince, and he says there's only one cure to be found. This cure is in the king's most precious gem, in the king's crown. This crown was designed around this gem. This gem was the centerpiece of the crown. And by taking out that gem, the whole crown was basically worthless. You have to take this gem, you have to grind it up, mix it with water, and make a potion out of it. And if this king's son, if the prince will drink this potion, he'll get better. But this prince was already in a coma. He was not eating and drinking for days. He was 3/4 of the way to the next world. Very little chance he's actually going to drink anything. The king was desperate. Anything, whatever we can. He's grasping at straws. They take the diamond, they grind it up, they give it to the son, and first nothing goes into his mouth. It spills out, goes on the floor. Tiny little drop goes into the king's mouth, the son's mouth, the prince's mouth, and slowly you can see the energy coming back into his body. All of a sudden, he opens his eyes. In a weak voice, he calls out to his father. He recognizes his father. His life was saved. The Alter Rebbe turns to his teacher and his colleague, and he says, the Jewish people, the prince's son, are ill. They're on life support, deathly ill. They need a magic potion. They need a precious potion to revive them. Now, there's such a serious situation that we don't know. Maybe that potion will get spilled on the floor. Maybe that potion won't actually enter into their mouth. Maybe a lot of it will get wasted. But if one tiny drop enters into that consciousness, there's a chance that they'll be saved. So the Jewish people, after that time, was after many terrible pogroms. it was a time, a period in Jewish history, it was a low. And the Jewish people were in a very low spiritual state as well. People were it was just a terrible situation, physically and spiritually. And the Alter Rebbe said that the Chassidic teachings, that's what's going to revive. It's like the king's precious gem, that's what's going to revive the king's son. That's one story. I'd like to share another story. A number of years ago in the 80s, mid-80s, about 86 roughly, so there's a fellow from Australia, he was a businessman, and eventually became more involved with the Jewish community over there, and his name was Woolstone, Pinchas Woolstone. And he was very well-to-do, very well off, and he used to support a lot of Jewish causes. One particular project that he was very heavily invested in was a beginner's minyan, a beginner's service, something to introduce beginners, people that are not familiar with the prayers and the insights of the prayers and how to pray, just everything from A to Z. He had this program set up that they would teach them and train them and get people more involved, get used to the prayers. That was his project. He came by the Rabbi at a special occasion for supporters of these type of events, and he turned to the Rabbi and he said, "Rabbi, I'd like to tell you about something that we're doing in Australia." And Rabbi listened closely to what he was just talking about, how we have this beginner's minyan, and there's people that have not had much of a Jewish background. They don't have any Jewish background, he says to the Rabbi, and they're being introduced to the basics of Judaism. The Rabbi looked at him very, very seriously. He was expecting a response. They had 130 people, the most recent occasion. He was expecting encouragement. The Rabbi looked at him very seriously. The Rabbi says, "No Jewish background? Go back and say to them that they are Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. Go back and tell them that they are sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Our matriarch, our forefathers and the matriarchs of the Jewish people, they have a direct connection to the best yichus, the best connection, the best Jewish. What do you mean they don't have a Jewish background? They have the Jewishest of backgrounds that is possible. The Rebbe looked at every person at not so much at the surface, the way they presented themselves, but at the soul of who they are, the neshama, the soul. That's what defined them. And I think these two stories can help give a little understanding of what we're doing over here, landed in Folsom. I think this sums it up. We came here because there's probably not by people in this room, because they feel already a connection. But by many of us around us, I'm sure we know many of our friends and neighbors that are Jewish perhaps, but not expressing it in the way that they could be. And they need a little bit of a injection, a magic potion to revive them, and bring out the neshama, reveal the neshama, reveal the soul. And that's what we came here to work on, to try and accomplish. And the neshama is a very powerful thing. It's not something which it's not limited by time and space. The soul is not limited by external limitations. And we underestimate sometimes the power of our own neshama. And I say l'chaim, to conclude with l'chaim, that we should tune into our neshama, we should tune into our soul, we should recognize its power, and should try to express it. We'll see that it'll make everything else in our lives a lot better and a lot more vibrant, and believe it or not, it is the magic potion. I know it's coming from me as a rabbi, but try it. L'chaim. So I know everyone's looking forward to this wonderful video presentation that Miles described earlier, but we're going to have to wait till a little later to get to that. Some minor technicalities. So without further ado, I would like to, it's my honor, my privilege, to introduce to you a very special guest that we have here for the first time in Folsom, but hopefully the first time of many. A fellow is excellent at what he does. He's a comedian, and we brought him here because he's a top in the business. And you'll see soon, I mean, in a couple of years, when he's one of the most famous people in the industry, you'll be able to say, I remember when he was here in Folsom, he came to us, we had a nice little crowd. In a couple of years, you won't be able to get such an intimate show from Avi Lieberman. He's done the late show with Craig Ferguson. He's appeared at Comedy Central. He uses his talent not only to perform and entertain people, but he actually uses it for very good purposes. He goes to Iraq. He's gone to Iraq and Afghanistan to entertain the troops and boost their morale, help them succeed in the mission that they've been charged with. He has a yearly comedy trip to Israel to raise funds for the Kobe Mandel Foundation. And without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Avi Lieberman.